Becoming permanently disabled can be devastating to your personal finances and seriously challenge your financial freedom and independence. In episode 28, I covered how to deal with that if it's the result of a job related injury. But what if it's for some other reason, like an auto accident or a debilitating disease? That's why in this episode of the podcast, I bring back attorney Sam Gaylord to talk about how to get disability benefits, whether you can get them, how you qualify for them, and how they can help you maintain your financial freedom. All right, here is Sam Gaylord, who's a self-proclaimed disability litigator, helping people who may be temporarily or permanently disabled due to a work-related accident, or permanently disabled and in need of pension disability or Social Security disability benefits. I talked to Sam back in episode 28 about preserving your financial freedom after being injured on the job. But what about when your disability is permanent? What happens then? So I wanted to talk to him in this episode about just that. Welcome back to the show, Sam. It's been quite a
Well,
while.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. No, it's great. It's been a while, and I'm thrilled that we can get back together again and do this.
Absolutely. So I was on your website actually looking at what you do, and you have an intro video, and you really limited your practice. You're sort of the disability guy, and you really have, because you have that type of niche practice, and a practice that not a lot of attorneys do, where where you sort of cover the gamut in that area, not only workers' compensation, which we talked about before, but Social Security disability and also pension disability, which I don't know how many people know about that. So I guess no matter how or what you're disabled, this is something that you help people with, right?
Right. So my 20-second elevator speech goes as follows, right? I'm Sam Gaylord, partner at Chapin and Lakin, disability litigator in the state of New Jersey, representing injured workers in the areas of workers' compensation, Social Security disability, and disability pension appeals. There you go, right? But
Right.
basically, the advantage that I have in terms of just doing these three things is that not only can we, walk someone through each of them individually, but I am sitting in the position where you took all three and made them a circle, the little circle that where they all touch each other, that's Sam Gaylord.
Hmm.
And it's an ability to understand not only how each operates and what the benefits are, but more importantly, how they all interact with each other, how some of them offset one another, and to just understand how to maximize for someone their benefits when either they have been injured or become sick and disabled.
So you're at the center of that three circle Venn diagram. Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's
Okay.
exactly
Yeah, we'll get into those different types of benefits, but you raise a good point as far as not only looking at them separately, but how they interact with one another or may offset one another. Because I'm sure there are some pitfalls or things to be careful of in dealing with these, to make sure you don't, take the wrong step and maybe either leave money on the table or have a major problem with your claim.
Yeah, one of the biggest things, and I always feel bad is, and I'll say it, like we wind up sometimes having to clean up or try and clean up spilled milk because let's say someone who has a workers' comp attorney is giving great workers' comp advice, but the advice that they're giving them is really contra to what the advice should be for purposes of pensions or Social Security. And when they start talking to me about the other areas, and I'm like, well, what did your workers' comp attorney say? And I hear what they'll say and be like, well, that fits that scenario, not your scenario, and here's why. And we try and sort of right the ship a little bit. So
Hmm.
it's very important, especially with, again, the combination of benefits, to really either have a working knowledge of how they all interact or to not provide advice and to say, hey, listen, you should really contact somebody who does that.
Right.
I'm just your workers' comp attorney.
Right. All right. Well, as I mentioned before in episode 28, we talked about workers' comp, and I would recommend to listeners, if you have a workers' comp claim and you're dealing with a temporary disability or looking to see how permanent disability works, in that sphere, then go to that episode. I'll leave a link to it in the show notes. But we want to talk about these other two. So let's start with Social Security disability. What are the benefits that you get from
Sure.
Social Security disability?
Sure. So benefits are basically, well, there's two benefits to receiving Social Security disability. The first is you're going to receive a monthly payment, and that monthly payment varies person to person because it's based on what your lifetime earnings were, or as they calculated are, up to the point of your disability. So every person's a little bit different. But you would be eligible to receive a monthly benefit from Social Security. And then once you've received or have received 2 years worth of Social Security disability benefits, you also become Medicare eligible. So it then doesn't base it, then it's not dependent on your age. But once you have received 2 years worth of Social Security benefits, then again, that Medicare option kicks in.
Mhm.
Usually the issue is that, when somebody applies for Social Security disability, more often than not, the reason that they're hiring us is because they've been denied. And so there's a process that you got to go through. We could talk about, but there's a process that you have to go through. And so as part of that process, usually someone is automatically entitled, once they've been approved, for retroactive benefits. So if the retroactive benefits is greater than 2 years worth of benefits, then once they're approved, now they're automatically eligible for Medicare. If they, let's say, only get a year and a half worth of benefits, then they only have to wait 6 months, and now we're going to be Medicare eligible. So those are the two benefits that someone will receive.
Great. So you have a stream of income, and you have health care, which is
Correct.
great.
Yep.
Now, if I understand correctly, I know that, when if you're just, you turn 65 or whatever age, I'm going to wait till 67, and you make your claim for Social Security benefits, they then look at your work record, how much you paid in to the Social Security Trust Fund during your working life, to calculate out what your monthly benefit would be. It sounds like what you're saying is it'll be calculated as of the date that you're found to be totally disabled. So it's sort of the same calculation, except it's not your date of that you turned 65, 66, 67. It's the date upon that you were found to be totally disabled, right?
Correct. So the way it works, right, that, yeah. So the way it works for Social Security purposes is that when someone applies for Social Security benefits, typically they're not, like, I got disabled yesterday and I'm applying for benefits today. That's usually not the situation. Usually it's, I've been dealing with state disability or short-term disability, and I've been out of work already 6 months, 9 months, whatever the case might be.
Mhm.
And usually it's somebody has told me I should apply for Social Security disability, more long-term disability benefits. So there's usually already a built-in retroactive period, right? So you say, okay, well, I became disabled March 1st of 2022, but my application is, let's say, November. Today is the 16th of 2022, right? Well, there's a couple of things that are really advantageous. First of all, from the time that anybody picks up the phone or looks to apply for Social Security disability benefits, Social Security will actually go backwards 1 full year from the date that you start, like, hey, I want to apply for benefits. So as long as you are, let's say, if you're out less than 1 year going back from the time that you apply, then you're eligible to receive benefits for the entire period of time that you, in fact, have been disabled. Okay.
Mhm.
Social Security typically does not pay benefits for the first 5 months. There is a presumption that you are receiving some form of short-term disability, either through the job or through your state disability benefits. So there's a presumption. So they don't pay benefits for the first 5 months, but they'll go retroactive in terms of your date of disability to the beginning date that you became disabled. So I was able to work up through the end of February. March 1st, I become disabled. I'm not going to receive benefits until August, but Social Security deems me disabled as of March 1st of 2022.
So they had that 5 months. So, for example, if you had a workers' comp claim and you've received temporary disability benefits were found to be permanently disabled and got permanent disability benefits, that's Social Security's way of sort of saving money and saying, well, you've already gotten those benefits. And maybe somebody who applied for disability through the state, like you apply for unemployment, you apply for disability, and you might get that benefit.
Yes, correct. That's exactly.
Now,
Yep.
my understanding, again, you say you're 45 years old and you get Social Security disability. Once you turn 65, it converts to straight Social Security, doesn't it? Or am I getting that
So what
wrong?
happens? No, that's exactly right. So what happens is Social Security tends to be about $300 or $400 less per month than your full Social Security age, right? So someone who's 45, who's been found to be disabled, they're more than likely not, their full retirement age is probably going to be 68 years old. So what happens is they will continue to receive Social Security disability up until the point where they hit the full retirement age. And then mechanically, what Social Security does is they basically take them from the Social Security disability budget line, and now they move them over to the regular Social Security retirement budget line, and they get a little bit of a raise on a monthly basis.
I would hope, because your Social Security disability payment was calculated on your work history up to that date. So our hypothetical of the 45-year-old person, maybe had a 20 to 25-year work history, they're stuck with that, as opposed to the person who gets regular Social Security at 65 with, say, 40 or 45 years of work history, right?
Correct. That's right. Yeah, correct.
So that's kind of a big downside. I mean, it may convert to regular Social Security, but you're not getting, what you could have if you had just
Had you been able to
retired.
work? Right.
Yeah.
100%. Yep.
So, I mean, do you have any recommendation for people? I don't know what you can do, as far as other investments or retirement planning or things that you can do during this period of disability, so that you're, instead of just sitting around and collecting from 45 to 65, are there things that people can do? I mean, I realize you're not a financial planner, but, what do you tell your clients?
Right. So there's a couple of things. First off, the first thing is somebody always will say, well, can I work? And what's interesting is about that question is that Social Security defines work
Mm-hmm.
as what they call substantial gainful activity, or SGA.
Mm-hmm.
And what they define as work is, in the year of 2022, is earning more than $1,350 per month. So, and each year that goes up a little bit. So basically, as long as you can do a little something like a part-time gig or whatever, as long as you're staying underneath that figure per month. And what you have to be aware of, and what I tell all my clients, is that's not like an average where one month I make 900, the next month I make 1,500. Therefore, if you average them, I'm staying underneath that 1,350, right? No, no, no. The Social Security looks at it every single month, that as long as you stay underneath that number, then you are not performing, again, substantial gainful activity. Therefore, you are not working. So there's a mechanism by which somebody can make a couple of dollars. Social Security disability is not based on finances. It was only based on whether or not you were, in fact, disabled. So someone who, let's say, might have $500,000 sitting in a 401k or an IRA, or $400,000 worth of real estate, or whatever it might be. There's no limitation. You don't have to like get that out of your name, or you can't like invest in the stock market or stuff like that. Absolutely not true. For purposes of being on Social Security disability, you're allowed to have investments, and you're allowed to have, potential retirement tools and things of that nature. The only time that having finances becomes an issue is if someone is looking to receive what they would call SSI, or supplemental security income. It's basically federal welfare, and that is financially based. And in that situation, you can't have more than $2,000 worth of assets in your name. And there's I think it's now a 5-year look back period where they can go backwards in time to see if that's, if you're going to fit the mold. So But for the most things, and I rarely will we do the SSI cases. There's a couple that are sort of the proverbial no-brainers, so it's not a problem. But for the most part, because there's a lot of finances and people aren't, as I'm sure in your world, no, people aren't necessarily as financial savvy or aware or have all of their information in the right spots. It tends to get a little bit more in the minutia, which is not something that we're really interested in dealing with. So for the
Mhm.
most part, we just stick with the Social Security disability cases.
So for Social Security benefits, you have that earning cap per month. And you're saying that doesn't exist for Social Security disability?
No, that's no. The cap, the 1350 per month, that is it. That's for Social Security disability, right?
Okay.
But for the Social Security disability, there's no cap on how much money you have in the bank, or like you could be someone who, let's say, has a house and owns a car and does that all of this, and then is in a car accident and now is disabled and now can't, go back to work. So you're going to apply for Social Security disability benefits. The fact that you own a house, the fact that you have a car or assets or whatnot, that has no role whatsoever in whether or not you're going to be eligible for Social Security disability benefits. The only question is whether or not you are disabled from not only doing your prior work type work, but any other work out there in the national economy.
Well, that begs the question then. If you have this income cap and you're totally disabled, if you can work and earn a few bucks, are you really totally disabled?
Well, again, like anything else, right? It's dependent on what the Social Security rules are, right? So if I can work, let's say 3 days a week, see, because Social Security isn't saying that that you have to be in bed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're completely incapacitated. What they're saying is that you can't, and what we have to show is that someone cannot work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and the repetitive nature of doing that over and over again. So
Mhm.
that's where, when we say you're disabled, the definition of that per Social Security's rules is just simply being able to show that somebody has disabilities that prevent them from that basically full-time employment.
Mhm.
So it may be that somebody has, uh, I don't know, mental health issues, or let's say gastroenterology issues, the IBS, and it prevents them from working full time, and or whatever, or diabetes, or some other condition that prevents somebody from being in an office or going somewhere and being able to work 8 hours a day, with the 1 hour for break and that kind of thing. But they may be able to do something like at their own schedule at 3 in the morning to 8 in the morning,
Mhm.
where you could make calls to Bangladesh or whatever. I don't know, coming up with something.
Right.
But there may be some couple of hours that somebody could work in an environment of their own choosing, not having to deal with other people, only being able to work a certain number of hours because now you've got to break and take time and whatnot. And so by doing those little things and not making or not going over that cap dollar, and again in 2022 it's 1350, then you're still, for Social Security's definition, disabled because you're not performing substantial gainful activity, which is how they define work.
And that work that you do, that small amount of work, I mean, does that then continue to count towards your work history for when they convert it to regular Social Security?
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
all right, so that's the question. That's the answer to the question. And people, the hypothetical person who becomes totally disabled at age 45, for the next 20 years, he can be a blogger, or maybe learn to write code or something, where he's sitting down for a few hours and typing in a keyboard, and it's not physically strenuous, or he can take breaks or things like that.
Sure,
Now,
absolutely. And again, look, and again, listen, whenever we do this,
mhm,
the answer is that, and there's a provision in Social Security which is really kind of neat, because what it says is that you can be eligible for benefits for what they call a closed period of time. All right.
mhm,
And it seems straightforward, but it's basically like, I'm in a car accident and I need, a year and a half worth of surgery and rehab and whatnot. but I get better, and now I'm able to go back and do either what I used to do, or I've retrained myself and I can go do something else.
Mhm.
So, okay, so I'm eligible for Social Security from point A to point B, but now I'm making more than that 1350. I'm able to go back into the workforce. So now I don't need Social Security disability anymore.
Mhm.
So now I'm able to return and do something else. We see that, quite a bit. And again, after all these years now, and I've done this for 26 plus years, what you know about people in general is that no one wants to be disabled. I guarantee everyone out there listening that in this environment, if given the choice of saying, "Hey, would you like to go back to work, or would you like to continue Social Security disability benefits if I could get rid of all of your issues?" I guarantee you, everyone would say, "Please send me back to work and get rid of all my issues." Right?
Right.
So it's not that these are things that people want to be stuck with. But again, if they can retrain themselves, or if they can figure out a way to get back into the workforce again, maybe not what they used to be doing, but some other job, and it becomes a full-time gig, and now they're making more money, then yeah, then they just stop receiving Social Security disability benefits, which is fine too.
Now that kind of leads into next question I had, which is again non-Social Security disability lawyer and just sort of the general practitioner. I understand that there are review periods, so you may be granted and found to be totally disabled by Social Security, but you're on a review period of anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 years, right? Is that for the reason you described, to see maybe you can go back to the workforce?
Yeah, yes. And the answer is either being able to go back to the workforce, or, somebody's condition has improved and there needs to be a reevaluation of that. Typically, the reviews come when somebody is younger. Once someone hits the age of, so Social Security breaks up people in terms of their age categories. The first thing they'll look at. And basically, anyone who's 49 years or younger, is they fall into the younger person category, and anybody from 49 to 54, they fall into what's called closely approaching advanced age, and then everybody over 54 years old is now they're in the advanced age category. And so if you're found to be disabled at 45, there is a great likelihood that you will be reevaluated by Social Security at some point, only because it's a lot of years of Social Security disability benefits, right? Whereas someone who may be 58, 59, 60 years old, yeah, it's probably not going to happen, because you're so close to when you would start to receive your Social Security retirement benefit anyways, that they're not going to go through the review process to open those files. So usually it's age dependent. And what I always tell clients is, look, what they're looking at, if they've made a decision already that you're disabled, what they're looking at is that there is a continuation of the need to receive medical treatment.
Mhm.
Okay. Because if you are found to be disabled, and the next thing you know, you don't see a doctor for another 10 years, and then all of a sudden you get a letter that says, "Oh, we're reviewing you," and then all of a sudden there's all these doctor's appointments. Yeah, it's gonna be a little, that's gonna be a little dicey, a little
Mhm.
suspect, if you will. But for the most part, anybody who we've had reviewed, because it's more difficult to get Social Security disability if you're a younger person.
Mhm.
So those are technically the cases that you see people who have multiple disabilities in play,
Mhm.
or a disability that's significant, that's not something that's going to go away, that's
Mhm.
going to either maintain or get worse.
Mhm.
MS, diabetes, heart conditions, things like that. It's not somebody who's got a shoulder injury, and they should be fine. Kind of like.
So how do they determine this 3, 5, or 7 years for a review?
Yeah, usually, again, I think it's based on their age. So we'll see that the younger individuals, or like for different disabilities, they'll usually review it earlier than later. So like if someone has, let's say, mental health issues, then you usually see a 3-year review. If somebody has congenital disabilities such as diabetes or MS or other kinds of conditions like that, usually you're not going to see the reviews quick. You'll see them longer, just because they know that those are conditions that are pretty much either going to stay stable or are going to, in fact, deteriorate someone's
Mhm.
health. So it's based on age, it's based on the disability that they're afflicted with.
Okay. Well, the next question, I guess, is, someone comes into your office and they say, I want to make a claim for Social Security disability, and you do an intake and you talk to them. Well, what do you look for, and what should our listeners know as far as what qualifies you for total disability through Social Security? When should you look at applying? How bad does it have to be, I guess, is the question.
Yep. Well, actually, there's actually a couple of really great questions inside of that. The first is that to be eligible to receive Social Security disability benefits, an individual has to be out of work for at least 6 months, and there has to be an indication that they're going to be out of work for at least 1 year. So the parameter to get into the entrance game is going to be, I'm going to be out of work for at least a year. And with that, now I'm able to move forward. Typically, we want someone applying for Social Security almost, if they're going to be out of work for 6 months and they're still receiving treatment, we're going to want them to apply right away, because the Social Security process from start to finish can take up to 18 months. So in New Jersey, it's a 3-step process. Somebody does the initial application. If they get denied, we do what's called reconsideration. If they get denied a second time, we ask for a hearing in front of a judge. And it's usually at that point where the percentages of denials sort of reverse themselves based on the fact that you're now dealing with someone who understands the nuances and the particular legal requirements to prove the disability. So we want people starting sooner than later, even if they're out of work 6 months, they think they're going to be out of work for a year, and then 11 months comes and they're able to return to work and they don't get to the 1 year marker. At least they started the process, because that initial application, when you pick up the phone or go online and start the process, that can take 4 to 6 months, just the initial application process. So we want people to do that sooner than later. To determine when somebody comes into the office, is this a case that we can help with? Is it something that we're going to look for? Certainly, again, the first thing is, how old is somebody? Do they have a long work history? And are they treating with doctors? And if so, are they treating with the right kinds of doctors? So someone will say, okay, I have been diagnosed as having, anxiety, depression, I have fibromyalgia, and I've got neck problems. And so, okay, so you say, my first questions at that point is, okay, are you treating with a psychologist or a psychiatrist? And they'll say, no, I just see my family doctor and he writes me a prescription for Zoloft or something like that. So, okay, so that's going to be tough because you're not seeing the right specialist to really document whether or not you have the kind of disability that Social Security would deem to qualify for benefits, right? I have fibromyalgia. Okay, are you seeing a rheumatologist? Yes, I am. Okay, are you getting medications? Yes, I am. And then what are those? And so now okay, they are seeing the right doctor. The medications are the right medications. So that's a condition that we can use for really purposes of that. So it really, and again, you do this for a long enough period of time, and reading medical records and knowing what the medications are and all of those things, and somebody will pronounce it and I'll finish the pronunciation and I'll spell it correctly because you've done it 100 times, right? It's like I can write that on a prescription pad too these days. So that's really what I'm looking for always is, does somebody have how old are they is first, obviously, but then it's, they have a long work history. You get someone who's worked for 35 years, and you obviously, when you have a hearing in front of a judge, you're going to say, Judge, this isn't somebody who woke up one day and said, hey, gee, let me go try and shoot for benefits 18 months later and give up my full-time salary. This is a person who worked for 35 years and they got injured in this car accident, and now clearly they can't go back to work. So that works to your advantage, right? But there are, like anything else, there are cases that I would take in a heartbeat. If somebody comes in and indicates that they're a younger person, but they have MS and they've treated with the right doctors, but that's, there are certain medical conditions that are sort of the proverbial no-brainers. That's one of them. And then there are certain like automatics, like for example, if somebody has a heart condition, and if by way of testing it demonstrates that the flow of blood out of the left ventricle is less than 35%, then they automatically get benefits. So it's an automatic. If somebody has vision issues and they can't see, I think it's 2200, then it's sort of almost an automatic, because it's blindness, that kind of thing. So there are certain disabilities that are really, I'll not say easy, but are very
More clear cut
calculable in terms of, this is going to be a winner and we're not going to have too much trouble. So
well, that's Social Security disability. Now let's talk a little bit about pension benefits. I guess the first question is, any old pension, or are there particular pensions that provide this type of disability benefit?
Yes. So in the state of New Jersey, there are 3 very specific benefit pension plans that we're dealing with. There are 4 really, but the 3 that I mostly deal with are Public Employee Retirement System. So that's somebody who's going to be working for the city, the state, a county, town, your laborers, your general workers, things of that nature, public employees. The next is police and fire, which sort of speaks for itself. And then the other is the teacher. It's the teacher pension annuity fund. And obviously those are for teachers. So if someone is in the state of New Jersey and they are working for a particular entity and part of that pension system, and they become disabled either by way of a work-related injury or just disabled from the sense of I have a disability and I can't work anymore, then they are eligible to apply for a disability through the state pension system. And then if they get denied, then we do that litigation.
Now, are the requirements, for lack of a better word, similar or different to Social Security disability? In other words, do you look for the same kinds of things in a claim under a pension benefit?
No, that's the short answer. The longer answer is no. The longer answer is this. So when somebody applies for a disability pension, what you have to demonstrate, or one of the things that you have to demonstrate, is that the disability prevents them from performing their regular or assigned job duties, or a job duty that the employer is willing to assign to them. So I'm a heavy equipment operator, and I am in the Public Employee Retirement System, and I'm involved in an incident at work where I slip and fall, I injure my back, and I have back fusion surgery, and now I can't, be a heavy equipment operator. Not that I'm totally disabled, not that there's not something out there that I could do. I just can't go back and sit in all of the heavy machinery and sit for, 8 hours a day operating machinery. So in that context, then you are now eligible to apply for the disability pension, because you can demonstrate that you are disabled from performing that specific job. So when we meet with someone for purposes of pension applications, the first question is, was this work related? Is it not work related? Was the car accident while you were working, or was the car accident outside of work? Because that depends, or that creates a dependent on what kind of pension that you can apply for. So in each of the 3 pension systems, PERS, police and fire, and teachers, there are 2 types of disability pensions that you can apply for. Now, I'm going to be painting with a big, huge brush here, but basically you can apply for accidental, which, if you wanted to think about it, are the work-related ones, and ordinary disability, which are the non-work-related ones. Okay. There's some nuance to that, which is longer and involved, but for the most part, if somebody is hurt at work and they cannot return to the job, then they're eligible to apply for accidental disability pension benefits. And again, depending on which system you're in, so if you're in public employees, PERS, or if you're in teachers, that would entitle you to 72.6%, 72.3% of the highest year or average of the 3 highest years of earnings tax-free plus your health insurance. So pretty good. For police and fire, it's 2/3 tax-free plus health insurance. And then if it's a non-work related, you apply for what's called ordinary disability pension. And again, if you're in teachers in the PERS, that's 46.3%, whereas in the police and fire, it's only 40%. But those are taxable dollars, but you still get your health insurance. So the big thing with applying for disability pension cases in New Jersey, of course, is for someone to be able to receive their health insurance into retirement as part of their pension benefit.
As opposed to the Medicare that you would get for Social Security disability.
Correct. Medicare, you have to wait 2 years. If you get approved for a disability pension, it's a come with, so you get it right away. And also, so the way it works is if somebody also who, let's say I work for, the state of New Jersey, and I also apply for Social Security, think of it this way: Social Security disability and disability pensions, I describe them as railroad tracks. They will never touch each other. You can receive both benefits, and neither of them offset the other.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, whether you can double dip.
Yep.
But the question that arose to me, you were talking about percentages of income as a benefit. And if I remember correctly, the police and fire percentage was lower than some of the others for an accidental claim or job related. And it seems to me that if you're police and fire, you're more likely to have a job related injury that can disable you totally. One would think that that would be the higher percentage.
Yes, but yes,
just saying.
However, most of the members of police and fire are usually having salaries that start at a much higher level than those of public employees or teachers. So even though the percentage is a little lower, the amount of money in terms of a benefit is usually higher than the public employee or the teacher, because those salaries are usually much lower.
So what you look at in taking a case on pension disability, pretty much the same as what you look at for Social Security disability?
There's a lot of similarities, yeah. Especially if they're non-work related, again, if we'll go to either I have MS or diabetes or something that prevents me from working. It's a lot of the same carryover. But if somebody has had, for example, go back to the example I was using where somebody's a heavy equipment operator, somebody has low back fusion surgery, it's pretty clear that they're not going to be able to go back to doing that type of work. But if that's their only disability, like their low back, not that that's not significant, but unless it's really bad to the point where someone has a doctor that's prescribing a walker, that's actually not a good Social Security disability case.
Yeah, you're right, because you were saying that with the pension application, if you can no longer do that job or job is assigned, you get it. But with Social Security disability, you pretty much can't do any job that's out there.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And the difference, right, and exactly. And the difference between getting the pension in my low back fusion case is that Social Security amended the requirements for an individual applying for low back injuries to receive Social Security disability benefits, as now including the need to have a treating doctor prescribing aids to walk. So there has to be the treating doctor prescribing a cane or prescribing a walker. So that's how bad the back, if that's the only disability, the back has to be that bad in order to be eligible to get Social Security disability. Whereas you could pretty easily say that if somebody has a low back fusion surgery and they're a heavy equipment operator bouncing up and down in the heavy equipment all day long, probably not going to be a thing that they're going to be able to do.
Okay. And you mentioned, as I said, you anticipated one of my questions, which is the pension disability and Social Security disability, as you put it, are two railroad tracks that never cross. So you can basically get both benefits without any kind of offset. Now,
that's right.
Let's throw the third wheel in here. We're not talking about workers' comp because that was in the previous episode we referred people to, but it is possible for, permanent disability is a relative thing in workers' comp. You can have, depending upon your level of disability, your percentage of disability, you can get permanent disability for a certain number of weeks and then it ends. But
Right.
it is possible, if you're really totally disabled, that you will get it pretty much indefinitely. Uh,
Also-
how does that, how do those permanent disability benefits and workers' comp interact with Social Security disability?
So yeah, so here's how it works. So if somebody gets hurt at work and they are out of work and they are receiving what's called workers' comp or temporary disability benefits, okay? And at the same time, because they've been out of work long enough, let's say over a year, but they're still
Mhm.
getting paid workers' comp, and now they get paid Social Security. So what happens is while they're receiving the workers' comp benefit, Social Security is reduced because they're also getting the workers' comp temporary benefit.
Mhm.
Once the workers' comp temp benefit ends, Social Security goes back up. Now that person now will move forward in workers' comp to get an award. If they get an award, that's a percentage. So where they get a certain number of benefits and then it ends, same thing happens. They get the money from workers' comp, but Social Security is reduced for the period of time they're getting that payment. If, however, in workers' comp, they're found to be totally disabled, so now they're going to get paid for the rest of their life from workers' comp takes the benefit. So now workers' comp is reduced and Social Security pays at the regular rate.
Mhm.
So there is an interaction between Social Security and workers' comp, just like there's an interaction between workers' comp and pensions. So the best way to describe it, right, is you think of these three things as like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So you got Social Security on this side, you got pensions on this side, they're the bread, and you got workers' comp in the middle, it's the peanut butter and jelly. And it sticks to both of them.
Now, let's make it really interesting.
Sure.
Let's say, let's say you have a workers' comp case and it's disputed. The
Yes.
the employer is saying, you may be disabled, but did not arise out of an course of employment. You have other contributing medical factors, and they're fighting it. And you settle the case under Section 20 of the Workers' Compensation Act, and you
Yep.
get a certain amount of money.
Yep.
How, if at all, does that interact with Social Security as far as you benefits you get from that?
Great question. And the answer is what we do is we create a scenario where we take whatever the dollar amount is and we will divide it out to try and say, oh, so as an example, let's say they settle a case for $20,000. So
Mhm.
what we'll do is we'll say, yes, our client is receiving this check for $20,000 or whatever, 16,000 minus the attorney's fee. But what that actually represents is 150 weeks of payments at $100 a week to equal the same amount. And what we're trying to do is reduce the amount of money per month under the description to then not then have it have an impact on their Social Security benefits. Because here's $16,000. Social Security is going to say, whoa, wait a minute, we think we need a piece of that, or we need to reduce our benefits for a while. So the answer is, okay, well, but Social Security, here's a copy of the court order. Although the client's getting this amount of money, it represents da 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 da. Based on my math, there shouldn't be an interaction. And so we sort of prevent them from coming in and trying to take some money away from our client.
Well, actually, and you're saying from your math, there's actually an objective analysis in there. I mean, for those of you who are not listeners who have never had a workers' comp injury or are not workers' comp attorneys, there are actually these tables that say, okay, if you this part of the body is disabled, this percentage, you get this amount of money for a certain number of weeks. So you would take that lump sum settlement under Section 20 and say, if this amount of money was paid out in an order approving settlement on
That's it.
disability,
You got it.
how many weeks out would it be? And how much would that be per month to
Yep.
calculate out any kind of offset against Social Security.
You got it. That's exactly right. Exactly
Cool.
right. And so the math is based on what Social Security calls so Social Security, when you look at their calculations, what they do is they calculate what's called the average cumulative earnings, which is again their formula on based on what your lifetime earnings are to equal what they determine to be your average cumulative earnings per month. So what it says is, as a combination of Social Security and workers' comp, you cannot, between the two of those, have more than 80% of the average cumulative earnings. So again, it becomes math, right? So it's how much am I getting paid from workers' comp? How much is my Social Security payment? Add the two, is that greater or less than 80% of my average cumulative earnings per Social Security? And if it's less, then I'm going to get the max from both. And if it goes over, depending on what benefit I'm receiving, will determine is comp going to be reduced or is Social Security going to be reduced.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, just to wrap it up a little bit to get an idea, I mean, as far as the application process, does the application process for Social Security or for pension disability, are they pretty similar or are they very different?
Now, the application process are pretty similar. Both you can do both online. They're different, obviously different websites. Social Security is the ssa.gov, and you can apply for disability benefits there. There's also an 800 number, and I still think that calling the 800 number and having a interview with a live person over the phone is better still, only because at least you get some human interaction and there's some accountability as to the forms are being sent out to them to fill in. And they call 800-772-1213. That's the number for Social Security. For pensions, it's all online. It's through the New Jersey Division of Pensions and Benefits website. They have every member has to have created what's called an account through their MBOSS system, which is Member Benefit Online System, MBOSS. And then it's also double authentication. So when I'm helping somebody do an application, we're doing it together. They're watching me either through Zoom or Teams or whatever we're using. And they'll give me their username and password. And then immediately what pops up is there's a 6-digit code that gets texted to their cell phone. So they have to then give me the code so that I can actually get into their MBOSS account, and then we can go through the application process. But again, everything's online. Everything can be uploaded. You can upload stuff to Social Security. You can upload stuff to pensions. So it makes it pretty easy if everything's, scanned, PDF, the whole 9 yards. The application process is pretty straightforward. Social Security will initially take 4 to 6 months to process an initial application, and pensions takes 8 months to process the application. So it's a little bit longer. And the reason for that is because on every disability pension case, the pension system, doesn't matter which one, they're going to send you to one of their experts, their independent medical expert. So there has to be a report that gets generated, which takes some time. But the process for pensions is about an 8-month window.
So the earlier you start, the better.
Yes.
And just one other point I want to make to our listeners, and we discussed this before we started recording, and that is anybody that has federal student loans or loans through New Jersey's class loan system with HESA, proof of total and permanent disability can result. You can apply for an administrative discharge of your student loans, so you can lift that burden. So that now we were talking about review periods of 3 to 5 to 7 years for federal student loans. They will accept a finding of total permanent disability from Social Security, but it must be on at least a 5 to 7 year review period to result in the discharge. So just point out there for our listeners. So somebody has a potential claim. They're looking for disability benefits. Sam, how do they reach out to you?
Any number of ways. The best is to certainly give me a call, 609-658-8289. That's my work cell phone. So anybody can always get me at that number. Or if you want to email me, it's sgaylord@shaferman.com. I'll spell that. It's SZAFERMAN.com, shaferman.com. And if they want to check out the videos or whatnot, just go to the website, www.shaferman.com. And all of the videos that we've done historically on comp and Social Security and pensions are there. And they usually provide some nice information, bits and pieces. We've chunked it down a little bit. So that's about it.
Great. Well, I'll make sure all that gets into the show notes. So if you're driving in your car and listening to this, I hope you're not writing it down at the same time.
Me too.
Yeah. And so you'll be able to get that at the show notes at podcast.richardsonlawoffices.com. But thanks for coming on the show, Sam. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners learned a lot on what they can get in benefits should they become totally disabled.
Well, I appreciate it. It's an absolute pleasure, and certainly it's great to see you again. Great to be interacting, and certainly I appreciate the invite and the time to talk to your listeners.
All right. Thanks a lot again. Bye-bye.
Take care.